Which NRL referees have the highest scoring games where there's tries everywhere and there's 50 plus points scored, which are great for try scorer bets, that's for sure. And which ones have the low scoring grinds, that low totals, close margins, that are difficult for your try scorer bets. You don't want to be betting on an NRL totals market without considering this information. So the analogy I want to use here is if we look at baseball, this is a really important comparison to use. Every home plate umpire in the MLB has a slightly different strike zone. Some give the pitcher an extra inch, a couple of inches on the corners of the strike zone, whereas others create a very small strike zone and make the pitcher throw it in that area if they want to get the strike. Now, the larger the strike zone, the more likely a strike is going to be thrown. The easier it is for a pitcher, less walks, and harder for the batter to score runs. The smaller strike zone, the easier it is for the batter to not get struck out and either put the ball in play or at least get on base through a walk. So you've got a situation where one's going to really favor runs being scored and one's not. With baseball, you can quickly and easily find the data for these home plate umpires so that you can make a decision based off who they've got behind home plate, whether that's going to favor runs or not favor runs. So NRL referees are exactly the same to a degree. However, for bettors, there's very limited information available. And I've been betting on NRL full time for the past 14 years or so now. And I've only minimally considered the referee over that time. Had a little bit of a, instinct on them, but I haven't necessarily kept a full amount of data on their overall performance. And that's only something that I've started to consider more and more and keep record of over recent seasons. And I've spoken previously about how when you're betting on NRL, sports, horse racing, you want to account for and consider as many different factors as you possibly can. You don't want to be ignoring information. Even just the other day, I'll tell you a story. I was watching a TV series called Numbers, and it's one of my favorite shows from probably 15 years or so ago now. And anyone who knows me will tell you that I love watching a rerun of a show that I've already seen. But anyway, in the show, one of the characters said, you can't account for everything. And the reply to that in that show Numbers, the mathematician guy, was you can account for everything if you can think of everything. So all the things that you can think of that matter in a game, you can account for and consider when making your decision on that outcome. What I see is a lot of people, they make their decisions just based on one variable or maybe two or three. And it's never good to make a betting decision based off that. And a lot of the time it's one of the biases, but bettors are going to ignore information that doesn't suit the narrative that they went into the game thinking it was going to be. It's like you have a bag with all this stuff that you need to know about it, and if you've already got a preconceived idea about what you want the outcome to be, you're just going to go through that bag and just pick out the things that suit your narrative and toss everything that matters. It's like how we can ignore things that just don't relate to what we want to be the case. And oftentimes that information that was tossed or ignored is the information that could have pointed them in another direction and gotten them the result that they actually wanted. And when we're betting, we need to account for and consider all the variables. So just like in baseball, you should be very cautious backing the overs if you've got an umpire with a large strike zone. So you just want to be cautious from that perspective. But then if you add to that as well, that the wind is blowing strong and it's blowing into the face of the batter from the outfield, then you've got strong starting pitchers which give up minimal hits and walks. Now the over is a terrible bet in that matchup. But there's always going to be a good percentage of bettors who just blindly bet the overs anyway because they saw that yesterday those same two teams in baseball, teams will play 3 or 4 games back to back against each other before going on to a different team. They'll see that yesterday those teams combined for 10 runs and they look at it, well, they're in great hitting form. That'll just continue on today. But if you look back at yesterday's game, it would have been a different umpire at home plate. Therefore, a different strike zone. The wind might have been blowing out instead of in. The starting pitches were obviously different. All those things matter and impact. So that's the comparison for baseball. That's enough about baseball. Let's look at the NRL here, the referees, and how their scoring impacts. So you can see the chart on the screen now, all the referees. and the scoring from their games. So we'll just go through them in order. Grant Atkins, he had the 30 games, so the most of any referee. His games averaged 43.5 total points. So that was about 3 points below the league average. Both home and away teams averaged under the expected points for them on the overall season average. Home teams slightly under, and then away teams 2 points on average. With those factors considered, it was no surprise 60% of his games went under the total points line for their matches, 18 of the 30 in total. Majority of his games were kept to 50 points or less. He also had more than double of any other referee of games that were 30 or less total points scored. He had 6, the next best referee. Obviously, also considering he did have the most games, but there were a number of other referees just with the 3 games. He also had the second most with 61 or more, but still with the most games, not quite much higher than the rest of the other referees. So for Atkins, lean unders of what we've seen off last season. Todd Smith had the next most, 27 matches. His games averaged about 2 points higher than the league average, but it was due to away teams. So home teams only averaged 22.4, which is nearly 3 below their season average, whereas away teams averaged nearly 5 points more per game. So it's no surprise in the last video how he spoke about how away teams covered at 67%. That right there is your reason why away teams found points very comfortably, and it's a big sample size with 27 matches. He had 16 of his 27 matches go over the total, so 59% of the time. Majority of the time, the total match points fell between 41 and 50 points. There were about a third of his games that fit into that margin. Adam G, the first of 3 refs with 26 matches. He was just below the average, about 1.5 points below the average total points. Home teams exceeded expectations slightly, about 1.2 above, and away teams were about 2.5 points below average. His games favor the under 58% of the time. Majority of the time, the games finishing between 31 and 50 points. So he was generally in that range. Didn't have too many super low or super high scoring matches throughout the season. Jared Sutton, he was pretty much spot on the average total point. Home teams slightly below, away teams slightly above average. He also split 50% either way, over and under. So there's no real edge either side compared to the other 3 referees that we previously spoke about. He had the majority of his games landing between 31 and 40 points, about a third of the time from that perspective. Another one without too many extremes of really high or really low scoring games. Peter Goff with 26 games, he averaged 47.2, so about 1 above the average. Away teams scored exactly the league average. Home teams were 1 above. 14 of his 26 matches went under, so 54% of the time. So slight lean towards the under with him. The majority of games were between 31 and 40 points. 15 of his 26 landed between 31 and 50. So that was his general points range throughout the season. Ashley Klein, he had 25 games. They averaged 48.1, so nearly 2 above the average. Home teams averaged 3.5 points more than the season average, and away teams about 1.5 points less. So definitely home teams running up a score for Ashley Klein was something that you can pay attention to. His games went over 56% of the time, oftentimes between 41 and 50 points scored. He did have 4 games with 61 or more. Then we had Wyatt Raymond. His games averaged more than any other referee with at least 14 matches, 49.3. So exactly 3 points more than the average. Home teams averaged nearly 2 points more, and away teams averaged about 1.5 points more. So both sides were doing better than what they would have been expected to do. 54% of his games went over the total. So bookmakers did definitely adjust for this. Even though he had the highest scoring games, the games didn't go over as a higher rate compared to, for example, Ashley Klein, who went over 56% of the time, or even Todd Smith at 59% of the time. However, it's once again a good opportunity for try scorers and that kind of thing with these high scoring matches. He only had 2 games with 30 or less. Majority of his games, 8 of them, of the 24, had 61 or more points. So he was by far the referee that had the most games with those big final scores. And then Liam Kennedy with 14 matches, he averaged 44.9, so one of the lower ones, about 1.5 points below average. Home teams were down 2.5 points. Away teams were up just over 1 point. So just be careful of home teams. This was one of the lowest scoring home team scores alongside Todd Smith. And he had 64% of his matches, so 9 of 14 went under the total. Majority of the time, the games landed between 31 and 40 points. Now, I won't go through the other ones individually just because there's not that many games that they had. There was only 15 games between the 5 of them. Chris Butler, though, his games averaged 50, which was the highest of all referees. Home teams averaging 30 points, away teams averaging 20 points. So home teams in his matches really found some good attacking form. He had 2 of his games reach 61 or more points. Belinda Sharp had the lowest scoring games of any referee, 35.6. All 5 of them went under the total points line, and none of them exceeded 50 total points in terms of the points ranges. Hopefully this video gave you some insight into which referees are going to favor higher scoring or lower scoring games, and you can use that in your betting decisions. I'll be keeping track of these in the NRL bet finders throughout the season, which you can access through the link in the description. And similar to where in the previous video we analyzed how referees perform for home and away, or favorites and underdogs and that kind of thing, there's more deep dive on all this information for every single referee in the NRL betting guide, where we break down the strongest angles for them, the team's record, so which teams are play better or worse with a referee in charge, which ones get more penalties and less, and all that kind of information. And you can get a really good, clear image of the best times to find that referee. So it just gives you another angle for analyzing games. Appreciate you guys watching. Hope you've been having a great week. I'm really excited for the NRL season coming up. There's going to be more videos previewing the year as we get closer to the season. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of those.